Hi everyone, today we are looking at fractions and understanding fractions. You do not need to worry about bringing a whiteboard to the carpet, but you will need a pencil, your math notebook, and headphones. If you still need to get these things, pause the video down below so that you can get your materials and we can get started. So in your math notebook, you'll want to write the date at the top. You can write it at the top of your notebook here. Remember to write the month, the date, and the year. And we're looking at fractions. And we're going to use our notebook to help us keep track of our thinking today so that we can go back and have a tool for later on. I'll give you a few seconds to jot that down. And at any time during the video, you can always pause or rewind the video so that way you can make sure you understand what we're talking about. Okay, so now that you have this written in your notebook with the date, let's go back to our first slide. Fractions launch mental math. Looking at the circle, how many pieces are in the circle? You can jot in your notebook, how many pieces are in this circle? How could we label each piece? Take a second to think about that. You can use your notebook to jot down your thoughts. Because today we're going to represent fractions using standard notation, words, and drawings. This means that I can show fractions in many different ways. So what is a fraction? We've talked a little bit about how a fraction is equal parts of a whole. So when I look at a fraction, it's two numbers, but they're showing me what equal parts of a whole is. So I might have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 dots, and I would represent that with a picture and then with the number 5. Well, I can also represent these dots as equal parts of a whole, showing that I have 4 out of 5 blue dots, and if I wrote it as a number, it'd be 4 over 5. Or I could talk about that I have this one red dot. So I might think of it as 1 out of 5 or 1/5. So we can use numbers in many different ways to represent pictures, our words, and some of the thinking that we'll be doing. And we also learned that the top number is called the numerator and the bottom number is called the denominator. So at the top of my fraction, that's the numerator. That tells me how many equal parts out of how many in the whole parts. So let's look at this fraction. What is this fraction? I see right away if I'm going to use a fraction, then I need my fraction bar. And I think of a fraction bar as when I'm to show that I've cut something into equal parts. So I'm first going to count to find the denominator. How many parts are there? So I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 equal parts. Now how many are shaded pink? Take a second. How many do you think are shaded pink? If I go back and count, I can see that there are 1, 2, 3 equal parts shaded pink. So there are 3 out of 6, or we would say 3/6. Remember with fractions where we're talking equal parts, we have that TH sound at the end of after many of our numbers. Let's try it with another one. Here I see that what fraction is this? So in your notebook, draw your fraction bar. And let's find the denominator first. How many parts are there in whole? Count with me. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that means 4 is my denominator. Now how many are shaded green? Count it out. Let's see what you can get. Let's check. 1, 2, 3 are shaded green. So you're right, we would call it 3/4. If I wanted to talk about how many are shaded white, I would say 1 out of the 4, where 1/4 is shaded white. Now you don't have to write that TH there, I'm just showing that to teach you. So we can represent fractions in many different ways. When we see it with a fraction circle or with a rectangle, we have to remember to count the equal parts whole and then how many are shaded. So if I have, we can look at this picture, I'll try to zoom in. If I have 2 equal parts, remember that 2 is a little tricky, it would be called half or halves. And I would write it as 1/2, but I would say 1/2, you might see it with words, 1/2, 1 out of 2 equal parts. If I cut it into 3 equal parts, we would call it third or thirds. So I'd say 1/3, 1 out of 3 equal parts. Here's 4. We know that 4 equal parts is called fourths. 6 is called sixths. 8 is called eighths. And we can go on and make it into as many equal parts as we would like. So here's another example. This is my whole shape here, and I can count it as 2 out of 3, or I could say it as 2/3. And I can write it as a number sentence and say 1/3 plus 1/3 equals 2/3, because I have, this is 1/3. Let me try and zoom in. Okay, now that we can see it really close, I could label each piece as 1/3, this is 1/3, and this is 1/3. Each piece is considered 1/3, but then if I take these 2 of the 3, then I have 2 of the thirds. We could write it that way. So in your notebook, draw a big circle. And let's represent 1/2. Draw a picture to show 1/2. I'll give you a second to do that now. So they've already shown us that 1/2 here with numbers. So I'm going to cut it into, looking at the bottom number, I'm going to cut it into 2 equal parts. And I don't want to shade the whole circle, so I'm just going to shade in half, one of the 2 parts. That's one way to represent 1/2. In your notebook, draw another circle. Let's represent 1/3. So I might draw a line from the top to the middle, to the left, and then to the right, like an upside down Y. And now I know that I have 1/3, 1/3, and 1/3. Now if I just want to show 1/3, I'm just going to shade in this one right here, and you could do that with me. And that's how we represent 1/3. So remember that fractions take the whole and they cut them into equal parts, whether it's half, 1/3, 1/4, 1/5, 1/6, 1/8, 1/10, 1/12. You really could make it into anything. You can always come back to this chart if you're stuck or not sure how to write the fraction. This is a resource for you. You just come back to this video. Great job.